As Qantas flights take to the skies again tonight, the political fallout is also up in the air. The dramatic escalation of what had already been a protracted industrial dispute is now the key test of the government's Fair Work system. Also at stake, perceptions of the Gillard government's ability to manage a crisis. Political correspondent Tommy Gooden reports.
After 48 hours of industrial chaos, the planes are back in the air.
The swift action the government took has brought the dispute to an end.
Not swift enough for Tony Abbott, who accuses the Prime Minister of dithering.
Why didn't she just pick up the phone to Alan Joyce and ask him not to ground the fleet? Was this too hard for you, Prime Minister?
I did act, and as a result, industrial action is at an end.
The opposition says the government could have ended the dispute more quickly because it should have seen the lockout coming. The government says the first it knew was when Qantas CEO Alan Joyce called 3 hours before he grounded the fleet.
He also indicated they would do that earlier if the information leaked, and that he was calling us as a courtesy call.
At first, Mr Joyce said he had told the government before then.
I said on multiple occasions we could get to a stage where we'd have to ground the airline. That's how bad this was, and that was made very clear.
Later, he backed off, suggesting there was no direct mention of the grounding before Saturday.
We made it very clear with various ministers that we could not survive for much longer. We made it very clear with various ministers that our operation and financial performance was such that this could not continue.
But the opposition already had the Transport Minister in its sights.
On how many occasions prior to 2 p.m. on Saturday did Qantas advise the Minister that if industrial unrest continued, it may have to ground its fleet?
Mr Joyce will confirm that on no occasion did Qantas ever raise the issue of a lockout of its workforce. If you listen, of a lockout of its workforce to myself or any other government minister.
Mr Joyce will verify that what Mr Albanese says is a correct account of their conversations.
Tony Abbott says the government's decision to use its independent Fair Work umpire cost valuable time.
Why didn't she immediately terminate this dispute without reference to a tribunal, as she could have under her Fair Work Act, thereby avoiding so much damage to hundreds of thousands of Australians?
But the Prime Minister says the government's role was to get unions and Qantas back to the bargaining table rather than directly intervene.
Indeed, in their days in office, the only time they intervened in industrial disputes with enthusiasm is when it was accompanied by dogs and balaclavas on the waterfront. Well, we stand for fair work and the Fair Work system, which is working. They stand for ripping off working people, and Mr Joyce is shouting out his enthusiasm for doing that all over again.
But the Greens say the government's capitulated to Qantas management.
The government, in going to Fair Work Australia and seeking a termination rather than a suspension, has in fact delivered Alan Joyce exactly what he wanted. That is an excuse to avoid negotiations with the unions and the workers who are involved.
Like Julia Gillard, Adam Bandt's a former industrial relations lawyer, and he says Fair Work's first major test has already set a bad precedent for future industrial disputes.
Put a gun to the head of the travelling public and then scream out, look what an awful situation this is, someone better step in and do something.
The government's faced its fair share of political crises this year, but this one's been averted before any damage could be done. Longer term, it opens up the debate on industrial relations, an area the government will feel, for now at least, it's on sturdy ground. Tom Iggulden, Lateline.